Here I want to show you my new sweater. It took me almost 1 year to test and try the pattern and try it myself and try different designs on it. And the main feature of it is that having only one instruction or only one written pattern, you can make plenty of different other ones. At the moment I have 5 different schemes or charts that you can apply for this sweater, but surely more coming. So you can also experiment with creating your design and place it into the template. Here are some examples. Here's a sweater with the whales where I used their chart with the Colorwork for both the whole body part and partly for the sleeves. Another one is with foxes, and here I used a design which I applied only partly on the body and sleeves. The reason is very simple, I used the rest of the orange yarn I had. Most of the schemes are made for 2 colors, and only one with the whales you can use for as many colors as you want. The pattern is also written for 2 different gauges, so it will work out for wider yarn range. I will explain it in more detail later in this video. Last but not least, both kids and adult sizes are available, so you can make match sweaters for yourself and your kids. The pattern you can find on my Etsy and Ravelry shops. All links you can find below in the description together with the key details. For this sweater I use a Raglan construction bottom up. I knit separately the body and sleeves, then join them together and do Raglan decreases evenly up to the neck. And then I seal the armholes and get my sweater ready to wear. Here I also apply a simple way of elevation, so the front and back are slightly different in height and more anatomic friendly. The sweater is a positive ease model, but feel free to choose the size which you feel fits best for you. You need to check first the bust circumference in the chart given and try it out, for example, using measurement tape. For example, my size is S, small, but I like oversize and I would normally need size medium and sometimes even size large. So this one with the whales I made for myself is size large. So if you're not sure what you want to get eventually, oversized or normal fit, I recommend finding any sweater you already have of which size fits you best or size you want to knit. Then you get the idea of which size you have to opt for. If you don't have any sweaters you can check the bust circumference on, just go to any clothes store and find a similar model. There's always a way to get an approximate idea of how the final product will look like. For kids, sizes are more like they should be, but slightly oversized in width, so kids have good room for underlayers and can also move freely. The gauge part is one of the important here, as the sweater is not only for kids and adults, but is also designed for 3 different yarn weights. For kids we go for gauge 22 stitches in 10 cm and 18 stitches in 10 cm. For adults we go for gauge 18 stitches in 10 cm and 13 stitches in 10 cm. Basically every group has an extra warm and medium warm option. Let me give you some yarn suggestions. As I said before, we have 3 different yarn weights we're going to use for kids and adult sweaters. I start with the lightest one, 22 stitches in 10 cm. It will be used for the kids version of the sweater. There are plenty of different yarn you can use here, for example, Drops Charisma or Drops Lima. You can also use Mayflower Easy Care Classic or Sandnes Garn Duo. This one I made from Drops Lima, for example. 18 stitches and 10 centimeters. This gauge is used for both kids and adult versions of the sweater. For this one, you can use Alafos Let Lopi, Hobby France Wool, Drops Nepal, and so on. 13 stitches in 10 centimeters. This one is used for the adult version of the sweater. Here I recommend using Alafos Lopi and Rauma Garn Worms. But there are plenty of options on the yarn market, just try what you have available at your place and look at the labels. Small variations in the recommended on label gauge can be corrected by adjusting the needle size. My recommendations is to opt for natural fibers, wool, alpaca wool, wool and cotton blend, but preferably not 100% merino wool and not 100% cotton, as they are too heavy, and of course not 100% acrylic or other synthetic fibers, as it normally doesn't look nice on a final garment and doesn't give any warmth at all. Please do a sample before you start knitting. Even with the recommended needle size, you still can get different gauges that will eventually affect the final size of your sweater. The most important is to check how you tend to knit stranded colors. If you already know that you tend to knit tightly and your knitting is getting squeezed, then you have to go up in needle size when you start knitting colorwork. So if you normally trust these numbers here and don't want to check the gauge beforehand, you have to use the needle size that is recommended on the label, not in the pattern. Additionally, if you tend to knit tightly, colorwork, try to go up in needle size. To sum up, don't underestimate the role of swatching, but you still can rely on label recommendations considering stranded colors, your own knitting style and common sense. In the pattern, I give the summarized amount of yarn you need for the sweater with the standard body and sleeve lengths. Before you start, make sure that you have enough yarn or have access to get a sufficient amount after. Let me show you an example. I take the total amount of yarn for my size as 100%. Then I know that for this model I will use more dark color than light color. Let's say 60-70% of dark and 30-40% of light. If the whole amount is 600 grams, then 60% of dark color will be roughly 400 grams and 40% of light color 200 grams. You might need less or more of these colors, but beforehand you can calculate only approximately. And of course, if you go for a cropped sweater, you will need less yarn, and if you go for a long model, you need more yarn. To be honest, in some models like this one with foxes, I simply didn't have much rest yarn, and therefore I just used up what I had. When I ran out of yarn on the upper part, I simply knitted the rest of the yoke using one color I still had. Therefore, this pattern can be rest yarn friendly. The tools list for every particular model, either for adults or for kids, as well as for different gauges, you can check in the pattern. I'm going to make a kid size model with a gauge 22 stitches in 10 centimeters, therefore I need the next set of tools. I will use circle needle size 3 mm, needle size 3.5 mm and also double pointed needles size 3 and 3.5 mm. If you use the magic loop technique, you need only circle needles. However, as I said earlier, if you are a tight knitter, especially for stranded colors, or your gauge can be achieved by different size needles, then you make your own set of needles. When you open the pattern, you will see the size range it offers. You simply choose the size, for example, just taking your own size or bigger one for an oversized fit. Measurement you can find a bit low on the same page. All the sizes are placed one after another and highlighted in order, you can easily pick them up. Every time you see the range of numbers given for all sizes, you know which one you have to adhere to. While watching this video, you have to use the numbers that correspond to your size, not the numbers that I use for the video. When the yarn and tools are ready, I start working on the sweater by reading through the pattern. I find my size and see how many stitches I need to cast on. It will be 154 stitches. If you prefer a classic cast on, go ahead. However, I prefer tubular cast on and therefore will use my method to cast on stitches. Here I don't explain details about tubular cast on, but you can see that I'm going to use waist contrast thread. After some purl rows and one tricky row, I will have my cast on ready. I like how this cast on looks like, very neat and advanced. The method is pretty simple and suits even beginner knitters. And if you would like to learn this method, please find the link to the video where I explain in detail how I do it. I use only this method for all my cast-ons. It is stretchy and easy to knit. It is also advised to try this cast-on on a sample before you use it for your first real project. Next, I work 3-4 cm of 1 knit, 1 purl rib using smaller needles. Here is nothing very special to learn, just ordinary rib. When the rib is ready, I need to make even increases and simultaneously change to bigger needles. To calculate how to evenly spread all 6 increases, I use a knitting increase calculator. The one I googled is enough for this simple task. I just input the number of stitches I have now and the number of stitches I need to increase. Click the button and voila, I get the instructions. I read the instructions and K stands for a knit stitch and M stands for an increase. First I do 13 knit stitches. Then I have a first increase, and for the increase I will lift up the strand in between stitches and make a twisted knit stitch from it. This increase doesn't leave holes and is almost invisible, so the increased stitch is just a knit stitch but made the way it becomes twisted. Then I do 25 knit stitches. Then I have a repeating part of 1 increase plus 26 stitches that has to be repeated 3 times. Finally, we'll have 1 increase, then 25 knit stitches, 1 increase, then 13 knit stitches. I simply follow the instructions and make twisted increases where I said. When the row is done, I get 160 stitches and have already changed to the bigger needles. Now I can start the chart with a chosen design, in my case with seagulls. All the charts are made to be read from right to left, bottom up. I introduce the other color, which is white for me. I don't make any notes here, but just start with the knitting stitches according to the chart. I put colors on different fingers, which will be very helpful for me to have everything in order. So I follow the first row of the chart. 1 white stitch, 1 blue stitch, 2 white stitches, and 6 blue stitches. Then repeat. In some charts, you will face long strands, more than 5 stitches in between one color. In this case, I recommend entangling the thread on the back side. How do I do it? I put the color which has the most stitches on the second finger, so it is laying behind. I will divide the number of stitches into 2 in my head. In my case, 3 stitches plus 3 stitches. So first 3 stitches I knit as normally, picking up the thread above the first thread. For the next 3 stitches, I pick them up under the first thread. So the thread behind will be tightened up closer to my knitting. I look at the back side and see that the thread is not hanging anymore. By the way, when you're trying to adjust the length of the thread, don't tighten it up. It is better if the thread is slightly loose, so you can stretch the knitting without resistance. But of course, too long stretch is also unnecessary and won't be looking good. After some practice, you will find out how it works best for you, and your hands will become familiar with the stranded colors technique. Then I just need to repeat the row from the beginning and do it until I reach the end of the row. And I will do it row after row, following my chart. If you are new to this technique, you need to gather your patience and follow the chart attentively stitch after stitch. No worries if in the beginning it takes you too much time and energy to keep focus not only on which color you need to use, but also on how to entangle long strands. I also like to check the other side. You see that I have slightly loose threads on the back that allow me to stretch the body without resistance. The length given in the pattern is just a suggestion and not a requirement. Some like crop sweaters if we talk about adult sizes, and some like dress-looking sweaters. In the pattern, you find a more or less standard length, but feel free to adjust it to your preferences. I keep following my chart until I reach the desired length of the kid's sweater size 4 years old. When I'm getting closer to the preferred length, I also want to stop before the row that will be the easiest to knit the next. For example, the row of one color or where I need less attention to follow. In the next video, I start knitting sleeves. I will explain how to make increases along the sleeves, how to work horizontal braids, and apply designs. Then I will join all parts, body and sleeves, and work Raglan decreases. Thanks for now and see you next video.